On today's show, can Pierre Luc Dubois be the guy to get Alex Ovechkin going this fall? I'll discuss next on this edition of Locked On Capitals.
Your Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Well, hello and welcome into this edition of Locked On Capitals. I'm so glad you decided to join me today. As always, this podcast is free and available on all the major platforms, including the SiriusXM app and on YouTube. And I want to thank you for making this your first listen each and every day. My name is Dan Holme. I've covered the Capitals for the last 3 seasons for Locked On and various other outlets before that. I'm also the host of the weekly show called The Capitals Minutecast, available wherever you find your podcasts. You can find me on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Locked On Caps. And the best way that you can help grow the show is to subscribe to Locked On Capitals on YouTube and comment anything down below. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Make every moment more. As playoffs wind down, the sports stop sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So in this edition of Locked On Capitals, we talk about Pierre Luc Dubois. On paper, he is sketched out to be the top line center for the Capitals. Alex Ovechkin talked about on breakdown day that he lacked chemistry with the centers that he played with. It was constantly getting juggled. Can PLD and Aube have chemistry and get Aube off to that really great start? We'll talk about that a little bit later. We'll talk about the addition of Andrew Mangiapane and what he means for the Capitals offense. Later, we'll talk about the fourth line changes with Duhaime and Raddysh. And then in the final segment, we'll talk about Jakob Chychrun and the changes to the blue line for the Capitals. In this edition, I am joined by Hockey Troll of the Caps Chirp Podcast. And just to be totally transparent, I am on vacation as you're watching this. So Hockey Troll will be with me all week as we talk about the activity going on with your Capitals. Already exciting news as I record this. On August 1st, as I hear John Carlson and Alex Alexiev are already on the ice getting in some early work. Positive signs, Capitals fans. We are headed in that direction. It's August 1st. Once we get through August, hockey starts, camp starts in September. There is a lot to be excited about, and I will have you guys covered the entire way. Next, my conversation with Hockey Troll of the Caps Chirp Podcast. On today's episode of Locked On Capitals, we have Hockey Troll of the Caps Chirp Podcast. Hockey Troll, welcome back to the show.
Thanks a lot, man. I know we've taken a bit of a hiatus as we do every summer, but kudos to you, grinding away, doing God's work.
And a busy summer, fair to say, for the Capitals. You know, we went into this summer and former GM Brian McClellan said that he was going to be busy. And I'm like, well, I've heard this before. And he took care of business actually before July 1st by signing Pierre Luc Dubois. There is some risk associated with him just based on his down season last season. But all things considered, I think a pretty good move for the Capitals. You take a look at Pierre Luc Dubois, scored 40 points in 82 games with the Kings last season. What were your initial thoughts to the Capitals signing PLD?
I loved it. I mean, this is a great move. The contract, people are going to be railing against the contract all the time. I can feel it now. But look, this is a guy who has seemingly everywhere. He's had to, quote unquote, pay his dues. And because, he's still young, he's 26 years old. He's always had to pay dues somewhere and never really got kind of the red carpet rolled out for him. I think the Washington Capitals are going to do that promising him a top 6. I mean, we're looking for a number 1 center, and that's yours to take, Pierre Luc Dubois. So, and if you can perform at that level, there's nothing stopping you from being the marquee superstar center in DC if you wanted to be. So yeah, so I loved it.
Yeah, are you concerned at all about the length of the deal? That is something that has me concerned, is that it seems like the Capitals gave up one head case for another head case. I guess I'm talking about Evgeny Kuznetsov, and they finally got free of that whole thing to add a guy that on paper there are some question marks surrounding him. Are you concerned at all about his personal traits or the length of the contract?
I would say the length of the contract more than personal traits. I think that he's going to work things out. Look, this is the time, and if you're going to be somebody, this is the time to do it. Like this age for him, if he's going to really take hockey seriously and want to become a top player in the league and, go win championships, I don't see why he couldn't make his start here. Maybe it happens in DC, maybe it doesn't. The length of the contract is a little bit of a tough pill to swallow, but at the same time, I think people hated the Darcy Kuemper contract, and look what happened to him. Dan, I've been on this show, and I was like, I think Kemper's contract in a couple years will be much more palatable to be moved. $5 million for a goalie, Vezina winner, and a Stanley Cup winner. He's got pedigree. You give him a shot, and especially at the term that the Kings got for him. So, I think that hopefully 5 years down the road, the cap will be well over $100 million. So you could pay a middle 6 center, it would be expensive, but you could pay him $8 million.
Yeah, and it's not like top line centers grow on trees. I guess that's the biggest thing. And I think kind of the masterclass of Brian McClellan in all of this is that he didn't have to mortgage the farm or give up a lot of futures to obtain him. There is some risk, and Brian McClellan said that one of his press conferences was that these were moves that were made, risky moves, but it kind of kept the team intact. You touched on Darcy Kuemper, and we'll talk about netminding a little bit later. That was the return that the Kings got, was Darcy Kuemper, and I'll touch on him here briefly, is that I don't necessarily think he got a fair shake, because I watched more videos with him after the season was over, and he said, listen, but you guys got to remember, when I was playing in the beginning of the season, the Capitals, the team wasn't playing that well because Spencer Carberry was new here. There were new systems, and I didn't find my way. And by the time the Capitals kind of got sure footing underneath of them, it was Charlie Lindgren's net, and then he never let go. And Darcy Kuemper said, I really worked on my game. I just never had a chance to show anyone because, well, Charlie Lindgren was playing that great. What are your thoughts on Darcy Kuemper? I know that it's easy to say he was a poor netminder because he had one off season in a vacuum, but like you were talking about, a former Stanley Cup winner, he has the pedigree, he has the history. What were your thoughts about the Capitals kind of giving Darcy Kuemper the cold shoulder?
Well, I think it was I didn't think Kuemper had a strong performance this last season. Now, of course, that I'm not trying to be too harsh. But it's really just hasn't been this last season. He's good for a couple leaky goals, Samsonov-esque, if you will, not nearly as bad. Don't get me wrong. And I do think Darcy Kuemper has a much better shot in LA, the style of goaltending that he plays. He likes to know where the shot's coming from. He likes the team to funnel into certain areas. And ultimately in the NHL, all you can ask for is your goalie to just make the first stop. The rest is on you, on the team. So with him, I think in a more controlled defensive, stronger defensive, and really committed defensive scheme, he's going to be in much better hands in LA. I was happy to get rid of the contract because it obviously opened the door for a ton of other things. And, you talk about masterclass. I think even though, whatever baggage PLD has on him, he was still the shiny bauble of the trade talks this season. I think, Brian McClellan said we're going to go out and get what we think can be a number 1 and a number 2 center maybe, and we're gonna get him. And PLD fits the bill. You're right. He had to find a suitor with Kuemper, and I mean to do all that in one deal, just finding the vulnerability that the Kings, because the Kings sent a boatload for PLD, man. I mean, I think this could look bad for the Kings in the future, but, you know, it may not, because I think Darcy Kuemper is going to have an outstanding season next season.
And I think to a certain extent that the Kings GM, he's thought that this was a mistake that he made, and he was trying to right a wrong. You know, and it's interesting, shortly after the deal, the talk outside of the Capitals community is like, what in the world are the Capitals doing? This guy is a bit of a head case. This was a guy that was in Columbus. He was in Winnipeg. He wanted out of both of those teams. And you take a look at the Kings, he was shown the door. But in fairness here, that's the rumor mill. That's how things are spoke of, is that his teammate Matt Roy said, listen, he's a good guy. I played with him in the locker room. Don't listen to all that chatter. So I am trying to maintain a positive attitude and give him the benefit of the doubt. So let's talk about where he is going to slot in. I think that some Capitals fans have him on the top line center. I think to myself, maybe not so fast. I take a look at the daily face-off. I saw different things from Sammy Silver, that kind of thing, different people's ideas. And they actually have Strome on the top line and PLD on the second line. Where do you think that Pierre Luc Dubois slots in? Do you think he gets the benefit of the doubt and starts with Alex Ovechkin on that top line, or how do you think this all shakes out?
I mean, I think the first quarter of the season, you're going to see him in a lot of different places. He may even take some shifts on the third line. I don't know. Carberry's shown that he's going to be able to put the lines in the blender. What I would, and I fully expect him with a host of new actual key players, he's going to want to squeeze the most performance out of all of them. If you look at like Pierre-Luc Dubois' gameplay and things like when he was, you know, up, I think that him being on that first line with Ovi and, you know, maybe Wilson would be okay. But really, I think that you could put two skill guys, maybe even two finishers on a PLD line if he's going to take a game over and he's just going to find guys. So I would like him. And this is not a knock against Dylan Strome, but I really like the Strome and Milano pairing. I think that they had a really good showing. Unfortunately, I think Sonny is probably going to get crushed on the depth chart here, you know, in favor of guys like Connor McMichael, Hendrix Lapierre. But I like those two dynamic. I don't know why. I liked watching them play together so selfishly, and they had success. So selfishly and for the team, I'd like to see Sonny Milano stay a second liner. But I think that, you know, McClellan said it. Both of those players, I mean, including Dylan Strome, who people have, you know, like you said, slotted for a number one position, have to take a step forward. The complexion of the Washington Capitals the past couple of years has changed dramatically. We are no longer the oldest, and we are now really kind of middle of the pack and getting younger as the days go on. So, you know, it's time for a new kind of regime here, if you will. And you've got huge shoes to fill, trying to replace Nicolas Backstrom or Evgeny Kuznetsov.
All right, so after the break, we'll talk about Alex Ovechkin and the chemistry with the centers on this team and the additions of Duhaime and Raddysh. Listen, there were a lot of changes to the fourth line of the Capitals with Malenstyn and Aube Kuebel going out to the Sabres. What will the additions of Duhaime and Raddysh mean? We'll discuss straight ahead. We're driven by the search for better, but when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. And Indeed doesn't just help you hire faster. 93% of employers agree Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to a recent survey. So if you are in the business of hiring and firing or HR in general, you need Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/locked on. Just go to Indeed.com/locked on right now and support our show by saying you heard about it on the Locked On Capitals podcast. Indeed.com/locked on. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all the shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports today brings you the can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Yeah, and it's an interesting position. We'll talk about Alex Ovechkin a little bit more in depth, but just to kind of keep it within the topic here, talking about Ovechkin, I think that one of the biggest reasons that they went out and acquired Pierre Luc Dubois is that Alex Ovechkin on breakdown day or thereabouts said that he felt like he didn't have chemistry with the centers. He didn't say it a matter of factly. He said it kind of in a roundabout way. He said that the lines were constantly changing. And like you were talking about with Nick Backstrom, he had such great chemistry with him for so many years, and Evgeny Kuznetsov. And this last season, it was Strome, it was McMichael, it was LaPierre, it was Dowd briefly, it was this, that, and the other thing. How much do you think Alex Ovechkin's thoughts on all of it factored into it?
Well, they said that he texted McClellan once the PLD trade went down and with a thumbs up emoji. Yeah. So, I don't know. I think I would say that his input is valued with the team, but I mean, you look at just dollars to cents here and like the deals that went down, they were just so logical and cold. At least it felt like to me. I think, Ovi is going to be able to, hopefully him and Pierre Luc Dubois have like incredible chemistry right off the bat. I'd love to see that in camp, and if that's the case, I think both of them get the number one line, and then you fit in a guy to supplement or to support. So ultimately, it could be a PLD assist to Alexander Ovechkin to break the record. I mean, who had that in the bingo?
I don't think anybody did. And, it's an interesting thing that I think for the longest time, this team was it was in this win now mode, but I think that they saw this team get younger based on necessity this last year, maybe not by design. In this episode, we are joined by hockey troll of the Caps Chirp Podcast. Next, another big move as they really wanted to go out and address the deficiencies in goal scoring. And they went out and signed Andrew Mangiapane, and a pretty good deal. Andrew Mangiapane from the Calgary Flames in exchange for a 2025 second-round pick. We take a look at him, recorded 40 points in 75 games last season and has 1 year left on his contract with a cap hit of $5.8 million. A name I'm familiar with, of course, when the Capitals play the Flames, it's kind of a unique name, so it stands out to me. He's also a player I remember was really good about 2 or 3 years ago and has since really not found that same style of play or that same effort. What were your initial thoughts about the Capitals acquiring Andrew Mangiapane?
I mean, again, not only, we talk about PLD and like that was an incredible deal, but then you just look at everything else that McClellan added. It was like, I think, we've gone win now for the entire Ovi era, right? The Capitals have been seemingly win now, but this just seemed like, we want it all. Like we want all the options. I mean, with the other two guy forwards that we brought in as well, that we're going to talk about later, like, that great depth, but, you do look at it, cause Mangiapane is a winger. Is that right?
Correct. And just looking how they have him slotted in, Andrew Mangiapane, second line right wing, with Tom Wilson on the top line right wing. Of course, this is all just how it's sketched out, but yes, a right winger primarily.
Yeah, so you're looking at replacing a TJ Oshie there. While I'm sure the Washington Capitals would welcome Osh back, I definitely think that McClellan, whose hands were tied, had to plan for any situation there. So I really like the move. I think that the Washington Capitals went high upside on a lot of these guys. They basically, to me, look like they took an age range that they wanted, and which means, all right, we're looking at 3-ish years. The potential for like 3 years with a player, if not more, until we actually have to ship this asset off. And the way that I think that they kind of did is they just went for it and got it all. And I'll be so bold. I think that PLD will easily hit the 70-point marker next year. And I think that Mangiapane is not going to be too far behind him. I would love another 30 goal scorer on this lineup. And I think we just netted at least 2.
Yeah, and another player in that mix as well would be Dylan Strome. He led the team in goals for a good chunk of the season until Alex Ovechkin decided to turn on the Jets in the second half of the season. But then there were the depth moves. An interesting thing as the Buffalo Sabres kind of sniped the Capitals' fourth line by taking Beck, Malenstyn, and Nicolas Aube Kuebel from the Capitals. And for the Malenstyn thing, it made sense because they had a different spot in the draft and they acquired Cole Hudson because of that. So that made sense. But I got to say, I'm going to kind of miss Beck Malenstyn's style of play on this team, that physical guy. But you got to kind of look at it. I think that it was a good upgrade. But one of the things that Brian McClellan did this last during free agency here was that he plugged the holes in the lineup. So he created a hole, 2 holes by Malenstyn and Aube Kuebel. What did he do? He added some key players to the team by adding Taylor Raddysh and Brandon Duhaime. Taylor Raddysh was signed to a 1-year contract worth $1 million. Brandon Duhaime was signed to a 2-year $3.7 million contract. So some depth moves, all things considered. I think that they kind of fit what the Capitals' fourth line is about, with Nick Dowd holding it down at the center. What were your thoughts, one, about Malenstyn and Aube Kuebel, but number 2, about the additions of Taylor Raddysh and Brandon Duhaime?
Well, first, I want to say congratulations to Beck, who is extended for 2 years and almost $3 million, I believe. Good for him. That's awesome money, for Beck Malenstyn, a guy who had to, struggled to break the lineup, was kind of out of nowhere, had some like really great NHL appearances, and then gets his Achilles torn when he's slated to make the club full time in the next season. I mean, Beck Malenstyn lost 2 years to injury before he even got into the NHL as a full-time NHLer. So good to see that he has moved on and gotten paid. The Washington Capitals were not going to be able to do that straight up for it. So I think it was what we added with Duhaime is just a ton of grit and a guy who can somewhat finish. I'm excited to see what Duhaime and Dowd can do together. And also, shout out Nicolas Aube Kuebel going out. I think a guy like Aube Kuebel is destined to be a journeyman, and some people just kind of fit that bill for him, but definitely going to go on to a great career and everything else. But, you look at Raddysh and he seems, I didn't see this. I don't even know who this guy is, to be honest, when we picked him up. So it'll be interesting to see what he can add to it. But I really think that the Washington Capitals are not only looking for, I think they're trying to supplement Dowd here, actually. Like, I think that they think that Dowd, who has been for a fourth liner, pretty productive on the score sheet as well, beyond playing the roles that he does excellently. I think that maybe they're looking to add some depth scoring here, and I think they did really well. I like it, and for cheap, it's cheap on top of that,
Yeah, that's the big thing. So let's take a look at the back of their hockey cards. Taylor Raddysh is going to be looking for a bounce back season, scored 14 points in 70 games with the Chicago Blackhawks. The hope there is that he has a bounce back season. And Brandon Duhaime recorded 13 points and 208 hits in 80 games this last season. So again, this is GM Brian McClellan plugging holes. And in a later segment, we'll talk about why they did that with Chris Patrick, I think ultimately trying to put him in a good position to succeed. All right, so after the break, we'll talk about the addition of Jakob Chychrun and the changes on the Capitals blue line and what to expect in the fall. We'll discuss straight ahead. I love sports. I love them so much, I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games and the sports aren't sporting like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open up the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And listen, I know that this is kind of the dog days of professional sports. I know that the NFL camps are going on and the NHL isn't starting until September, but there is still plenty to bet on as your Washington Nationals are playing right now. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. In this episode, we are joined by Hockey Troll of the Caps Chirp Podcast. So the thing that really got my juices flowing was that when I heard the Capitals acquired Jakob Chychrun, this is a guy that's quite familiar as the Capitals were all in on him before he went to Ottawa. And the thing of it is, this is a masterclass yet again for GM Brian McClellan. They gave up Nick Jensen and a 2026 third-round pick to get Jakob Chychrun. Quite a big thing. He is a guy in his younger day, was a forward, likes the having the forward aspect of his game, but transitioned over into being a blue liner, a defenseman. So Jakob Chychrun, a 26-year-old left-handed defenseman, scored 41 points in 82 games for the Senators last season. Quite a pickup. And what are some of the things that we know about the blue line for the Capitals? Is John Carlson routinely playing between 25 and 30 minutes a night. He never complains, just goes about and does his business. And some people would say, well, what's the big deal? Quality minutes. I mean, you could throw me on the ice for 25 or 30 minutes, and that's not going to be the best hockey that you've ever seen. He plays really great hockey. So sustainability for John Carlson and the Capitals. What was your initial response to the Capitals acquiring Jakob Chychrun?
So this was a guy I think we talked about years ago when he was on the move from Arizona.
Yes.
I remember, were more enthused as you are now than I was about Jakob Chychrun at the time. But again, this is another blue line mover who was highly touted, highly sought after, one of the headliner guys that was on the move, and Brian McClellan scoops him up. Chychrun, again, a guy who's played in these clubs that are struggling ever since. I think just like Pierre Luc Dubois, the best club he was on was Winnipeg. But Chychrun, the Yotes and then the Sens, okay, pretty rough going for it. So it'll be interesting to see what he comes in, how these players respond to a winning culture, seeing guys who've done it before, legends in the locker room. I mean, you kind of have to buy in a little bit. And that's why I'm really not worried about this head case chatter about it. And, Pierre Luc Dubois still wears Krivlinkins, I think, the goaltender who passed away in Columbus. The guy obviously cares about his teammates. Same with Chychrun. Yes, he's going to be an offensive piece. At this point right now, we need it. Had to be league worst goals from the blue line, or damn near the basement. The Washington Capitals couldn't find the back of the net, least of all their defensive blue line. And I mean, you look at John Carlson, who's basically, struggling to get 40 points. That's tough. And I don't think that's really his fault. The forwards weren't finishing. He wasn't able to collect those apples. Like, you look at this, and then you got to think about how Chychrun's going to meld with Sandin as well, so we're looking at a young, exciting blue line now. Hopefully that they can all still play defense and not be too offensively minded, but I like it at this point. I'm not super hyped, but it was the number one of the top gets, and we absolutely filled a hole. And like I said, we do need offense on that blue line. So let's hope we don't get soft. That's all. I think maybe Duhaime's gonna pick up some of the slack there.
Yeah, and physicality is something that has always been kind of the hallmark of the Capitals for years. We're talking, of course, Wilson and Erskine in recent memory, just a physical team. And I think the Capitals play best when they're engaged physically. Alex Ovechkin had points, but necessarily not his game as much anymore. All right. I want to thank all of you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals and also Hockey Troll of the Caps Chirp Podcast. Again, he will be joining me this week as I am on vacation talking Capitals movement throughout the summer. So thank you for joining me and making this your first listen each and every day. Thank you for making Locked On Capitals your first listen of the day. For your second listen, enjoy the Locked On NHL podcast. Locked On NHL provides you with a national perspective on all things NHL each and every day, with national experts and local insight on every team in the league. Available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And once again, I want to thank you all for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Dan Holme, and I'll talk to you again next time.